Professor Alan Dershowitz, I first met when a former student of mine became a student of his, and we had dinner together at Harvard that time. Sonny Brenner, if you remember, is a Brooklyn native who has been called the nation's most peripatetic civil liberties lawyer and one of its most distinguished defenders of individual rights. The best-known criminal lawyer in the world, the top lawyer of last resort, these are all quotations, America's most public Jewish defender and Israel's single most visible defender, the Jewish state's lead attorney in the court of public opinion. He is the Felix Frankfurter Professor of Law at Harvard Law School. He is a graduate of Brooklyn College and Yale Law School, joined the Harvard Law School faculty at age 25 after clerking for Judge David Bazelon and Justice Arthur Goldberg, and today he is 26. He has also published more than 100 articles in magazines and journals such as the New York Times Magazine, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, the New Republic, the Nation, Commentary, Saturday Review, the Harvard Law Review, and the Yale Law Journal. And more than 300 of his articles have appeared in syndication in 50 national daily newspapers. Professor Dershowitz is the author of 27 fiction and nonfiction works with a worldwide audience. His most recent titles include Rights from Wrong, The Case for Israel, The Case for Peace, Blasphemy, How the Religious Right is Hijacking the Declaration of Independence, Preemption, A Knife That Cuts Both Ways, Finding Jefferson, A Lost Letter, A Remarkable Discovery, and the First Amendment in an Age of Terrorism, and The Case for Moral Clarity, Israel, Hamas, and Gaza. In addition to his numerous law review articles and books about criminal and constitutional law, he has written, taught, and lectured about history, philosophy, psychology, literature, mathematics, theology, music, sports, and even delicatessens. In 1983, the Anti-Defamation League of the B'nai B'rith presented him with the William O. Douglas First Amendment Award for his compassionate, eloquent leadership and persistent advocacy in the struggle for civil and human rights. In presenting the award, Nobel laureate Elie Wiesel said, "If there had been a few people like Alan Dershowitz during the 1930s and 40s, the history of European Jewry might have been different." Professor Dershowitz has been awarded the Honorary Doctorate of Laws degree by Yeshiva University, the Hebrew Union College, Brooklyn College, Syracuse University, and Haifa University. The New York Criminal Bar Association honored him for his, quote, outstanding contribution as a scholar and dedicated defender of human rights. It's indeed an honor for me to introduce Professor Alan Dershowitz.
Thank you so much. What a great honor it is for me to be in any way associated with the wonderful family that's being honored here tonight. I know from what I've seen and what I've heard, I would have loved to meet your husband and your father, and also to be associated with Shaare Zedek. I've had associations with that hospital before. When I watched the film, I realized how many associations I've had. I went with Prime Minister Netanyahu last year to Merkaz Harav, which had been the site of that act of terrorism. And Arthur Edelman, my dear friend who I grew up with in Brooklyn, became the head of neonatology at Shaare Zedek, and I visited the hospital on a number of occasions. And the very concept of Zedek so summarizes both the work of our honoree tonight and the family, and also of the hospital. Zedek, tzedakah, justice, giving. So I want to spend just a few minutes, because I'm looking forward to having our conversation about ethics, on the concept of Jewish ethics. A few years ago, the New York Times wrote a book review of one of my books, and they said it was about the greatest of oxymorons, legal ethics. I think there are legal ethics. I've been teaching it for 35 years, and I even teach my freshman students at Harvard College a course on where does your morality come from. And in both courses, I make a sharp distinction between personal morality and professional ethics. And Judaism, as Dr. Osner has mentioned, doesn't really believe in these kinds of dualities, but in real life, you have to make such distinctions. I do terrible things in my professional life, at least many of you probably think I do. I represent guilty people, and if I'm good, I get them off. And is that an ethical thing to do? Is that a moral thing to do? It's what my profession demands of me, and it's a good profession. When somebody tells me a secret, I can't reveal it, even if the secret is that they've killed somebody or done something horrible. I'm not alone. A rabbi, a doctor, priest also has professional obligations to do what some people would think were immoral things. And so we have to maintain that dichotomy. It's not the defense of the guards at Auschwitz. They were just doing their job. It's that the job we do is such an important one. Most of my clients, my criminal clients, are guilty. Most people charged with crime are guilty. Thank God for that. Would anybody want to live in a country where most people charged with crime were innocent? That may be Iran or Cuba or China. But to keep it that way, our job is to vigorously defend. Now, it's not easy to explain that. My mother used to describe my defense of O.J. Simpson as the Oy O.J. phase of my career. And when I would meet people at events like this, prior to the O.J. case, many would come over to me and say, oh, I think we're related, they're cousins through marriage. When I was involved in the Simpson case, even people named Dershowitz would deny being related to me. It's a common name, who knows, maybe there's a misspelling somewhere. And I think a lot about ethics, and I think a lot about morality. And I describe myself as a Jewish lawyer. What does that mean? What does it mean to be a Jewish doctor, a Jewish lawyer? Everybody knows that Sandy Koufax was a Jewish pitcher, but his curveball had nothing to do with being Jewish. He was a Jewish baseball player because of something he didn't do. He did not pitch on Yom Kippur. I am a Jewish lawyer because of what I actually do. I try my best to practice law in what I believe is in the Jewish tradition. And I search the literature for hints as to what that tradition really is. And my favorite story is right at the beginning of the book of Bereshit, and it really supports what Dr. Rosner brilliantly told us about, I think his words were, pragmatic rules of Jewish ethics. You all remember the story. It's a very common story. God comes down and tells Avraham in the book of Bereshit right away, as soon as he meets him, he says, shall I withhold from my servant Abraham what I am about to do to the sinners of Sodom? And he says to Abraham, I have sent down, I'm going down to Sodom, and if I see that there is sinning going on in that city, I will destroy the city. God is certain of his views, and Abraham, the new boy in town, just met God, has incredible chutzpah. In fact, the word chutzpah comes from this incident in the Bible. Chutzpah kala'apei shemaya in the Talmud describes Abraham's argument with God. And Abraham says to God, Chalila, hashofet kol haaretz, the judge of all the world, you will be unjust? You will sweep the innocent away with the guilty? What if there are 50 innocent people? What if there are 50 righteous people? And God says, all right, Abraham, you've made your point. If there are 50 righteous people, I will spare the city. Abraham, the great lawyer, begins to handle with God. For the lack of 10, would you kill the city? What if there are 40? What if there are 30? What if there are 20? Finally, he gets God down to 10. What if there are 10? God says, if there are 10 righteous people, I will spare the city. Abraham then moves away and doesn't ask him for 6 or 4 or 3 or 2 or 1. In the Catholic tradition, and in many other religious traditions, to allow even one innocent person to die is a mortal sin. But the Jewish tradition recognizes matters of degree. Look, God can do perfect justice. He knows who's guilty and who's innocent. But God was trying to teach Abraham how to do human justice. And what he was saying is 50 innocent is too many. Maybe 4 or 5 is the price you have to pay for a justice system. In fact, the governor of Illinois a few years ago, when he discovered 13 innocent people on death row, he didn't just spare the 13 people. He said 13 innocent people on death row raises questions about the legitimacy of the entire system, and I am calling a halt on executions. He understood that story. And when Blackstone famously said, better 10 guilty go free than 1 innocent be wrongly confined, he didn't say better 100. He didn't say better 1,000. He said better 10, taking it right from the Abraham story. And so I think Jewish ethics is very distinguishable from the ethics of many other religions in its pragmatism, in its understanding of matters of degree. Jewish ethics also recognizes dissent. Almost every other religion burned dissenting opinions and then ultimately burned dissenters. As Justice Jackson said at Nuremberg, those who start by burning books end by burning people. In the Jewish tradition, what did we do with dissenters? We honored them. We published their dissenting opinions alongside the majority opinions in the Talmud. Why? Because who knows? Maybe someday the dissenting view will prevail. Maybe conditions will change. Judaism, I think, eschews absolutes. As Dr. Rosner said, pikuach nefesh, the saving of life, trumps virtually every other obligation in the Torah. Matters of degree are crucially central to creating an ethic that can be applied realistically. And let's think about how Israel applies that ethic on a daily basis. Israel has the most moral and the most ethical military in the history of the world, bar none. I challenge anybody to name another country that indoctrinates its soldiers with ethics to the degree that Israel does it. It hires philosophers, professors at Hebrew University, professors at Ben Gurion, at Bar Ilan, to teach the soldiers ethics. It teaches them that carrying deadly weapons requires the highest level of ethics. And Israel, in its 75 or 80-year struggle against terrorism and to help and defend the Jewish people, has killed fewer civilians than any country facing comparable threats in any other period of time in history. Israel has the highest level of moral and ethical constraints on the use of military force. When Justice Brennan, perhaps the most liberal justice ever to serve on the Supreme Court, went to Israel at the invitation of Aharon Barak, the president of the Supreme Court, just before 9/11, he came back and he presciently said, if God forbid terrorism were ever to come to the United States, there's only one country from which we could learn how to balance civil liberties and ethics and the need to prevent terrorism, and that country is Israel. And yet, Israel is the most vilified country at the United Nations. If a space alien landed at Turtle Bay at the United Nations and looked at the resolutions of the United Nations, he'd think there was only one evil country on the face of the earth, Israel. Not Iran, not China, not Cuba, not Rwanda, not Belarus, only Israel. And that's why, for me, a major test in my own life of the ethics and the morality of people I meet is, where do you stand on Israel? For me, that is a central test of a person's morality. Not, are you uncritical of Israel? I love America. I'm critical of America. I love Israel. I'm critical of some Israeli policies. That's not the issue. The issue is, where does Israel stand in your heart, in your soul? Are you supportive of its efforts to do moral things, or are you so critical of everything it does that it can do no right? The hatred that one sees regarding Israel on college campuses 50 miles from here at Irvine, hundreds of miles from here at Berkeley, thousands of miles from here at Norwegian universities and Danish universities and French universities and Spanish universities, it's simply irrational. There is no ethical justification, no moral justification for the kind of hatred that Israel experiences in the world today. Another form of ethics that I just want to mention for 1 minute, and then we'll get on with our panel, is academic ethics. And that's been greatly neglected in the world today. We hear a lot about academic freedom, and professors ought to have the right to speak freely and express their views outside of the classroom. But inside of that classroom, when you stand up on that lectern, you have a moral and an ethical obligation not to use that privilege to propagandize students toward your views, whether they're pro-Israel or anti-Israel. Your job as an academic is to tell the truth. Your job as an academic is to be fair, to be balanced, to focus on veritas, emet, not on personal views. You have no right to use that platform to downgrade your students who disagree with you, or to upgrade students who agree with you, or to frighten students into agreeing with you. And I have to tell you that today that is a major scandal at American universities. Look on YouTube and you will see a professor at a conference at the University of Pennsylvania teaching English literature, urging other professors to smuggle anti-Israel propaganda into every classroom, whether it be mathematics or literature or science. You're not doing your job, she says on the YouTube video, unless you persuade every one of your students that Israel is evil no matter what class you're teaching. And so more emphasis has to be placed on academic morality, academic ethics. That is not inconsistent with academic freedom. And so we're here tonight to celebrate two matters. One, the life of a great, great man who devoted himself to Zedek, to emet, to tzedakah, and a great institution that devotes itself to doing so much good in the world. You know, if you look at just medicine, no country in the history of the world, I'm not overstating, believe me, no country in the history of the world in 64 years has ever contributed more to medicine per capita than Israel has done. No country has saved more Muslim lives, Arab lives, putting aside Jewish lives, than the state of Israel with its medical technology, with its other technologies, with its environmental technology, with its life-saving drip technology. The world ought to be so appreciative of Shaare Zedek. The world ought to be so appreciative of the state of Israel. The world ought to be so appreciative of the contributions that Jews have made to medicine and to life, and yet we're not appreciated. Well, we don't do it for appreciation. We do it because it's the right thing. And we will continue to do it because it's the right thing. And when we think about doing the right thing, we will always, always think about Ralph Amado. We will always think about Shaare Zedek Hospital. Thank you very much.